So when you look at the market right now, one of the things you hear a lot about, David and Arnie, is that it's harder to get a mortgage. And I think that's a myth. I don't think it's harder to get a mortgage. I think that there are more steps and there's more documentation. And also, I think that over the last 6 months to a year, things have softened a little bit. We get home sellers coming to us selling their home, and they're concerned, oh, I don't want anybody with a mortgage. I've heard all the horror stories. Most of those horror stories are 5 years old now. They're gone. But tell us kind of what's going on in that space. Is it harder to get a mortgage or not? And, how's it different now versus it was, a year, 2, 3 years ago?
Well, I'll give you a 10,000 foot view, and then I'll let David talk about the day-to-day stuff. But, is it harder than it was in 2005? Yes. Okay. Because in 2005, we didn't even have to verify your income or your assets or hardly anything, and then we would get you a mortgage. And that was part of the problem that we ran into with the real estate market, okay? Because we weren't verifying that technically people could pay that back their mortgage. Now, the government is putting restrictions on us to make sure that we can justify to the government to say, hey, we have researched this particular borrower and we have identified that they have the ability to repay the mortgage now, okay? That said, just like everything else, when something bad happens, especially with government, the pendulum goes too far one way. So the pendulum's starting to come back a little bit now and make it easier, meaning that we have programs now that the whole down payment can be a gift. FHA is talking about lowering the credit score requirement again. So there's things going out there about that. But it's not, and I can guarantee you it's easier than you think it is based on what you hear in the media. And what kind of feedback you
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think a lot of the horror stories came from these mortgage brokers who weren't closing in their own bank's name, and all of a sudden the funding would drop out at the closing table.
And then everyone's pointing the finger at everyone else. Nobody's got their name on it.
Exactly.
Put your name on it.
No one signs. Our loans, they close in house, so we don't have that problem. The funding's happen right then and there, so it's not it's sent off somewhere else, some magical land, and that's what a lot of the horror stories that you hear about. Hey, we were supposed to close, we're at the closing table, and the money's not there.
Well, one quick topic on this, and this is just kind of going back. David is our resident millennial expert. Okay, so we talked about that on the show about how this market is going to be the market of the millennial. And if you're a retiree, if you're somebody out there and you're thinking right now, why do I want to hear about all these young people buying homes? I talked about it on the show last week. The reason it matters to you is because when that millennial buys a $200,000 starter home, the person that sells their 200 goes out and buys a 400, and that person goes out and buys a 600. So the sale of your higher end property is contingent a lot of times on that first domino being turned over. So we want the millennials to really push into the market to stop renting and buying again, because it fuels our real estate market. It fuels sales at every single price range. So when you hear about the horror stories about the challenging pieces of getting a mortgage and all that, how can you relate that to the millennials out there? They're debating renting versus buying. I guess I'm looking for maybe a couple points on that.
I mean, basically, people just need to know. I mean, getting a mortgage, there's not this 20% down payment requirement. I mean, you can get in with very, very low down payment, very commonly 3%, 3.5%. I mean, those are very common programs that a lot of first-time home buyers or second and third and fourth-time home buyers utilize. But the thing you have to know is there's documentation required. Tax returns, W-2s, pay stubs, bank statements, and what a lot of people, with bank statements, they think, okay, the more money in the bank, the better. Well, then that's generally, you would think that's true, and for the most part it is, but right before you buy a house isn't the time to deposit your fantasy football winnings. It isn't the time to get that loan.
Come back from Vegas with your cash to put in the bank.
If you can't document the money that's going into your bank statements, for the government, that's a problem. So that's something that we discuss with the clients and talk about, and let's try to make your life and my life a little easier in how we're going to document this.
It's also not a time to see major change in those financial statements. Like all of a sudden you went out and blew a couple $1,000 in a weekend, or those types of things throw up red flags, and I think, okay, what's going on here? So there's always concerns.
We've talked about it before. Don't go out and buy your car at the same time. Don't go out and buy your furniture before you move into the house. Those are things that credit report is going to reflect.
I don't know if you guys saw this article, but I thought it was really cool. The Tampa Bay Business Journal had an article: want to buy a home in Tampa, your annual salary should be at least $38,000. I found that kind of interesting because it can be misleading in a way, because the consumer can think, oh, I don't make enough, and that doesn't mean you can't qualify for a home. They're probably talking about an average home. But talk for, actually, because we're up against the break, we're going to continue this after the break. But I want to hear from you guys about the debt to income, why that matters, why they threw that income number out there, and why you may need more or less than that depending on certain conditions. Because you can have somebody read that and say, "Oh, I make 38 grand a year, I can buy a house," and it's not as easily it's not as easy as that.